Hello, we are Team Gosla. We are working on a chatbot to get information about movies, in which any user can ask information uh, to the robot, and the robot gets information from the movie database. We are using TMDB database. Um, the project structure consists of two folders, the source and the external. The source folder consists of two files, the CSS and the JS file. The source folder is the folder in which we enter the code which we write by our own self, and the external folder is the folder in which we get code and information from the external source, like the bot UI or the APIs. In the external folder, we have two files for bot UI. One is CSS and JS. In the JS, we have two bot UI file and one JavaScript file.
Front end of the Flixbot looks like. When you open the web page, the Flixbot greets you with a message. Let me refresh the page. So it will greet you with a message for you to enter your name. So I'll just go ahead and enter my name. Upon entering your name, it will ask you how it can help you. In this sprint, we haven't implemented any NLP library, so even though the bot will let you enter a query, it will not be able to give you the answers to your query. Instead, it will show the following message.
So when we started this project, we decided that we needed to do some research for the different components that we needed to put together in order to make the chatbot work. So there was the front-end interface framework, and then there was also the natural language processing, and also an API that we could use to pull data from some sort of database that would give us the information the chatbot needed to answer its queries, and that was the movie database API. So we set those up, and we also created some designs for what our chatbot could potentially look like, and so it doesn't quite adhere to what we ended up making, but it's the initial idea that we had. And then we also made a use case diagram where we would be able to depict the different interactions that the different components of our system would need to do in order to communicate with each other. So the user would talk to the chatbot, and they would type their queries and receive answers back in the form of messages. But the chatbot itself has to go through a couple different steps to understand what the user is saying and then pull the relevant information from the database. So it would pass the user's message to our backend where the natural language processing is happening, and then the natural language processor, after it figures out what the user is actually asking for, whether it's a movie name or how long the movie is or a top 10 list of horror movies or anything like that, they would pass some sort of query to the movie API requesting the information that it needs. And then all this information would get passed back to the chatbot, who would respond to the user with a natural sounding dialogue that provides the answer that the user requested. So that was our idea of how all of these different parts would interact with each other, and that was how we went about basically splitting out the project, because the first thing that the user sees is the interface. So we felt that the customer would want to know how that would look like, and then we would be able to go from there. So that's why we decided to make our Sprint 1 goal to create the basic front end for the chatbot, so that you can kind of see what the chatbot looks like. And we decided to commit to 3 of our user stories out of this list in our backlog. And those 3 were 2 smaller ones. One is just to get the chatbot to say a greeting to the user when the web app is opened. And then the second thing was to get the user's name, to ask for their name so that the chatbot could talk to them in a personal manner. The big one that we committed to this sprint was to develop the interface of the chatbot chat box. So that was the bulk of what our research covered and what most of the code went into dealing with.
Hi there, we are Team Gosler. We are working on a chatbot to get information about movies. This is the front end of the chatbot where user type information and the bot will respond accordingly. First of all, the bot will ask about the name, and like my name is Nabil. The bot will ask how can I help you. Like user can get information about alternative titles, primary information, rating, release information, or trending movies. For example, if a user want to know about alternative title of any movies, like I can ask, I want to, I want to look up Frozen in other language. The bot will respond accordingly and give the name of Frozen in other languages. If I want to know about the primary information of any movie, I will ask what type of movie is done. The bot will respond accordingly and tell what type of movie is done. Then if I want to know about the rating of any movie, I will ask how is Die Hard. The bot will respond accordingly. If I want to know about the release information of any movie, I will ask when was Shutter Island release. If I want to ask about any movie or trending movies or movies should I watch for, like I can ask what movie should I watch. The bot will respond accordingly and give the name of few movies the user can watch. So this is how the way the chatbot will work on the front side.
So in our sprint number 2, um, we set our sprint goal to be to set up the back end of the chatbot so that we could start taking user inputs, processing them through natural language processing, and bringing back an answer from the MovieDB database. So our specific goal was to have the chatbot be able to process a couple of specific types of queries, including just general information about movies, release information, movie ratings, alternative titles, and trending movies. And we also added the clause that if the chatbot doesn't recognize the question, it would display a message in response. We committed a couple of user stories in our sprint 2, and this task board includes all of those, and we did manage to finish all of our user stories within the current sprint, so we did successfully meet our sprint goal. This is what the task board currently looks like, and it includes multiple tasks for each user story. And if we go back, we can see that this is the time between the first sprint and the second sprint, and we are pretty well on track based on the kind of projected line here. So we did get all of the user stories done. The value that we added to this deliverable is that the chatbot now is functioning. It can't do everything yet because we haven't implemented everything as shown by some of these user stories that are left for the next sprint. But we did get the chatbot to be able to pull information from the database and respond in a natural manner, so that it greatly expands the functionality from the last sprint, which basically all it could do was just say hi and ask for the user's name.
So when the user enters a query, that query is being sent to the Dialogflow agent, and the Dialogflow agent has been trained to understand that query and then understand what's the intent for that query. Here you can see there are multiple intents already defined. For example, in this need alternative titles agent intent, we have already predefined and trained our agent to recognize these kinds of sentences. And this frozen movie has been trained to be recognized by the agent. Dialogflow won't recognize the movie name as it is. So we have created a custom entity called movie and trained Dialogflow to recognize these many movies. Our fulfillment tab will have the URL to our external hosted server from where the Dialogflow will be receiving the movie related data. So for example, if I'm trying what are the trending movies, yeah, see, I made a mistake here while typing, so I'm getting a default response because Dialogflow was not able to recognize it. I can try get this info. And here I got this response from the server.